the only progressive in the neighborhood. And lo and behold, because of Bernie, when I went to the caucuses, there were 400 people showed up at our gym. Yeah, we ran out of chairs.
Wow.
So I was inspired and I decided to be the change I wanted to see. And there was a special election last year. And so I decided to just throw my name in the hat, throw my hat in the ring and say, okay, let's just get this ball rolling. Sometimes it just takes someone to open the door to let people know that there's a whole nother world on the other side of it. So that's what I've been doing for the last 15 months. And it has been humbling and wonderful and exhausting and exhilarating and very inspiring.
Well, that's very exciting. Thank you. Rhonda, would you like to start where you like to start? It's such a good start. It's a good start.
My start, yes. Let me bring this up. So I am a member of Represent Us. We work on the American Anti-Corruption Act. It's a national platform, and it's about getting money out of politics, being transparent, getting corruption out, and election reform. So first off, have you heard about the American Anti-Corruption Act? Have you been able to take a look at it at all?
I have, and I do not take corporate money. And I'm happy to say that none of the candidates running as progressives in the 7th are taking corporate money this year. So yay! We are leading by example.
I love it. It's very near and dear to my heart, as we know that it can really kind of skew our political.
Oh, it absolutely does.
This is out there. So thank you. Also, it focuses on some election reform. To be able to hopefully get more proportional representation across the state or nation as well. So have you heard of ranked choice voting or like a scored voting system? And how do you feel about looking at maybe possibly implementing something like that?
I love ranked choice voting, actually. It's confusing for a lot of people, but I think the only way we're going to successfully get 3 parties or more in our process, which would help, is to have ranked choice. That until we have ranked choice, the third party is always, even if it always ends up feeling like it took votes away from someone. But if we have ranked choice, then having more than 2 parties it will really, I think, kind of bridge that gap and get people to get engaged and involved and not feel like they're throwing their vote away or some of the lame arguments you hear.
Beautiful, thank you. So I'm glad that you pointed out that you're not taking any corporate cash. So is it all the small
Yes
donations, your volunteers, the people on the ground?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you very much. All right, my major stuff is good. So Courtney is going to go ahead and talk to you about a list that we came up with. Go ahead, Courtney.
Okay, so we compiled this as a group, and we like to go through and discuss each of these and it can be brief and fast, and we can just fly through. Or you might be motivated to make a short statement on each one. And we can always come back to discuss it further if you want to just go through it fast. But we're asking, is this service something that should be a public service or something offered through privatized means?
Okay, and this service meaning?
Oh, well, the service is on the list that I'm about to go through. Okay. And so sometimes we get a combination hybrid. And I do feel like I need to find a new way of expressing this, but even if you think it should be publicly funded, it doesn't mean it's exclusive. Like if we say schools and you're a fan of public schools, it doesn't mean you're a fan of obliterating private schools.
Right.
So
I can love babies and whales.
Okay, excellent. Yes. Thank you. So we'll start with healthcare.
Yes. So healthcare should be publicly funded. It is a human right. No one in a country as rich as ours, no one should go without healthcare. But I also think that there is a private, I don't want to have public healthcare as in the NHS, like in the UK. I want publicly funded private healthcare. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
You pay private, the government pays private providers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So single payer, I believe is the proper term for that. And Medicare, Medicaid expansion is a perfect example of that.
Okay. And Postal Service?
Postal Service is near and dear to my heart, because as rural America, we still actually depend on the post office a lot more than people in urban areas do. And it needs to be publicly funded and publicly available. I don't see a lot of room for privatization in the post office. We have some contract carriers, and it's never the quality of service we get from straight up government funded post office.
Excellent. And schools?
Schools, again, are publicly funded. Education is not only a right, it's our investment in our future. And yes, I actually did send my kids to private school at one point because there wasn't a public school available. We lived on a ranch in New Mexico, so, you know.
Okay.
My husband went to 12 years of Catholic school, but that was our choice.
Yeah.
And that's great if you can do it, but I will never take money away from public schools to fund private schools. Public schools are our paramount duty as Washington citizens, according to our Constitution.
Excellent. And prisons?
Prisons, it is anytime people make money off the suffering of others, it's just straight up wrong. And prisons should always be kept by the public. We should have say over what happens in them to ensure that we are doing our due diligence as citizens to make prisons rare and a one-time occurrence and a learning experience, not a way to keep people down.
Excellent. Thank you. The distribution and investment of Social Security?
Again, that would be a public thing. That was a public safety net we set up after we saw firsthand as a country what happens when people can't live in dignity. We saw people by the millions suffering and dying and living without basic dignity. And we the people decided that that was not something we were going to allow to happen in our nation. And it is up to we, the people, to maintain that program and to ensure that people always have a minimum of dignity in this country.
Excellent. Foster care.
Foster care. You know, foster care is really interesting. I didn't know a lot about foster care. Just wasn't part of my life experience until we started kind of fostering a child who had aged out of the foster care system. And I've learned a lot since then. And that is one of those things that takes the public-private partnership. It needs to be funded publicly. We need to make sure it's done and that we are regulating it and monitoring it and that we have control over it. But it takes everyday private citizens and nonprofit groups and groups that are dedicated to the care of children to make that work. We can't institutionalize children in a government setting and give them the same nurturing care that they can have in families.
Absolutely.
And so we have to do both in that world.
That's beautiful. And I'd like to come back and after all of this and discuss the aging out.
Oh, yes.
So I'm interested in hearing more about that in your experience. But we'll go on with the list. Childcare, publicly funded.
Yeah, childcare is, we were just talking about this the other day. I'm not sure why we have made this arbitrary decision that at 5 years old, we will start educating your child and caring for your child until they are 18 years old. But before that, you're kind of on your own. It's not our problem. It is part of the reason that we have this growing discrepancy between men and women and pay and gender and equality gaps and all of this is the very basic of childcare. Someone needs to be home taking care of children or they need to be able to afford to take care of children. And we understand that we need to educate children. We understand that we need to provide them health care. We need to provide childcare also so families can be successful. And it needs to be monitored and regulated just like our other social services to ensure that every child is getting quality health care, quality childcare, quality education. That needs to be our goal for all of our citizens starting from birth.
Beautiful. Okay. And then utilities, electricity, trash removal.
So broadband, the fact that we're having this conversation in my house in nowhere land in Eastern Washington, and I mean that with all the love for everyone who lives here, but I love living in rural America, but this is a challenge. And it has taken years to achieve this challenge. Sorry, just got a little pop-up. And still, only about 40% of the people in my district have accessible internet. Broadband internet is a utility. We need to make sure that we cover the basics of living, water, electricity, internet. All of those things fall under public, and the communities that have maintained a public utility and they maintain control over their utilities, their telephones, their broadband, their water, do better than the communities that have sold them off for profit. We do have to understand that, again, that basic minimum of dignity, living with dignity, means you have running water in your house, means you have electricity in your house, means you have access to the outside world in your house. Those are the things that we've set forth as citizens as what it takes to have a basic life. And beyond that, you're on your own to succeed. But we're going to make sure you have the basic tools to get there.
Well, I asked one question and you answered 3 of them, so thank you.
Politician.
A very efficient politician. So the next one on I'll just skip down. Public lands and natural resources.
Public lands are my weakness, my near to dear. I have spent my whole life outside. I am an outdoor cat. I love to be outside. And keeping public lands public is something I will fight for. The Bears Ears National Monument, I lived in Utah for many years, and I was so devastated that that land was taken back. This belongs to everyone. And I want generations to come to be able to do the same things I've done. I can literally get on my horse right here and ride to Canada. I want that to always be true.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. And banks.
Banks. I believe that Washington State should have its own bank. I also believe in private banks and savings and loans and credit unions. But I do believe that the state should have its own bank where we as citizens know what our money is going for and to, and that we can control so many of the things. I don't like the fact that my tax money is invested with Wells Fargo. I don't like the fact that my tax money is invested with Bank of America. That I refuse to bank with them personally. I don't like the fact that my tax money is used there. I think as a state, we can do that ourselves, and we can do it more efficiently, and we can serve our population better. Oh, what? Stop. Sorry, don't know how to make that stop.
I bet that hardly ever goes off nowadays, right? Like,
oh no, yeah. Well, and I turned the ringer off, and I thought that would just
take care of it all.
Take care of it all. Yeah. So not sure what I've done here, but let's try. Okay, I'm little now. I don't know how to be big.
Oh. I think you're living big.
Okay.
So we have the next one is mass transit with examples of buses, ferries, railways, and airways.
So fun fact, in the 7th, we have 2 of the only free ferries in the state of Washington.
Really?
I know.
You're not even coastal.
We have ferries over here.
Do they go across a lake?
They go across. Well, they go across Lake Roosevelt, which is actually the Columbia River.
Okay.
So yes, and we could not function. Our communities could not function without those ferries. We have not seen fit to build bridges. So ferries are, there we go. Ferries are very important. Public transit is one of the things that keeps a lot of rural communities from thriving. Mm-hmm. My daughter's a prime example. I have a beautiful daughter. who lives in town because she has some medical issues and she's not able to drive. She lives in our one little cute city, and then it has a hospital and a grocery store and a pharmacy and everything she needs.
Is that
But
Newport?
Pardon
Is
me?
that Newport?
No, it's Twila.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But if she needs to do something outside of her very tiny little community, there's no public transit to get her into Spokane. There's no public transit to get her into Colville. There is one bus that runs, you can catch it one way. You can go into Spokane, but you can't get back because it's the same bus that comes back. So unless you spend the night there, you're kind of sunk. Or you can get to Twila, but you can't get back. And her doctor is over in at OHSU Medical Center in Portland, and she can ride the Amtrak train, which is great. And once she gets to Portland, she's home free. She's public transit all the way. She can do everything she needs to do. But the simple act of just going into Spokane is harder than going all the way to Portland.
Wow.
So rural America, rural Eastern Washington, we need some definite attention paid that hasn't been paid in decades to effective public transit over large distances.
Thank you. And then we've got infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
Roads, bridges.
Yes. So we definitely that needs to be public, not private. Toll roads are a no-go. And we have the longest county bridge in the state of Washington is in Ponderay County. And it is currently structurally unsound and practically obsolete, which means that it can only take one truck at a time, and it stops at the mill. Only one truck can go over it at a time.
Oh my.
And there's no money to fix it. It was built in the 60s. Its lifespan was 30 years. It's almost 30 years past its lifespan, and there's no money to fix it.
Excellent. Okay. And military and its associated industrial complex.
So I grew up south of Puyallup, between McCord and Puyallup. I grew up with the sounds of freedom flying over my house.
I'm on the flight path in Tacoma.
Better known as smoking warthogs back then. And I do have a tremendous amount of respect for our military. But we are spending so much of our talent and our treasure on so little return. We don't need to have the biggest military by exponential scales. There is no one in the world that comes anywhere near what we already have, and we continue to grow. We need to sit down and have a long, hard conversation about where we're spending our time, our talent, and our treasures, and what we need to have a free and open society. We need a military, but does it need to be our defining factor?
Right. And how do you feel about like Blackwater, privatized agents?
No. Again, anyone who has the capability of taking another life needs to also have the responsibility of the citizens of the country behind them, and that they're held responsible by every one of us. That is never done for money, and that is never done in out of greed. That is done out of protection of this country, for this country, and by this country.
Excellent. I think you might have put it the most beautifully as I've heard. So thanks. And the Veterans Administration, should that be privatized?
No, we made a promise to our veterans, and we've made that promise since before this country was actually founded, that if you stand up to defend the values and the people of this nation, that we will protect you and we will defend you. And again, that is our responsibility as citizens. That doesn't belong to any private group. There should never be any profit from that. That is the cost of a free society. and that is our responsibility.
Thank you. Scientific funding.
Scientific funding. So that goes back to that public-private. We need to ensure that we have regulations and a framework set up for scientific funding, because just because you can doesn't mean you should. We don't need dinosaurs. Don't do it. Just don't do it. But we do need to go to space, and so we do need that framework. But as a government, as a people, we are never going to be able to be as agile and as mobile and as innovative as the private sector can be.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to set forth goals and set forth money, and then allow that free market to really go after it and show us what you can do.
So in that, would you be willing to require private companies who do research to reveal all of the research they did and not cherry pick their studies, and avoid selling government funded science to private companies for profit making?
Yeah, and that gets into, we wouldn't have Velcro if someone hadn't sold government funded stuff to private industry. There does come a point where the things that we fund do become useful in everyday life, and we as a government don't have a mechanism for marketing them. So I think that has to be looked at very closely and decide where those lines are. I don't want to stymie that kind of innovation, and I want to reward people who make good products that we can use every day. And that's, my life has changed a lot since your life began.
I'm older than you think, ma'am.
Still, just
but thank you.
And that's good, and I want to keep that up. But we should not be profiting off, again, that profiting off war and profiting off
prisons and stuff.
profiting off the public in a private way. That's a real thin line that requires people with a lot of integrity and good ethics to make sure it's done.
Well, in your words made me think that maybe we could find a way to tax the private industry that's profiting off of the publicly funded science to make it copacetic.
Right. Yeah. There's always a solution, but you have to be looking for that solution, and you have to understand the moral, the ethical, and the economic challenges involved. And then, when you do the right thing for the right reason, it works.
Well, the next thing you already touched on, being such an efficient candidate, was space exploration.
Hey, I love space.
So, and much like I said, it's like schools, publicly funded schools, not obliterating private schools, but we're not going to fund charter schools. So, do you still have space for NASA, even with some private industry happening?
Absolutely, we have to have NASA. And not because we need a space force, as cool as it sounds.
This question has taken a new turn in the recent month.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I should
edit. Sorry. But yeah, we do need NASA. We do need a federally funded program that's full intention is space. I believe space is just like art. It can, the study and exploration of space can be for the sake of the study and exploration of space. It doesn't have to be for anything else. That's perfectly a reasonable thing to study and understand and look into and figure out where we're going. I love that. But again, private industry, private innovation is going to be able to achieve some of these goals. But we do need that framework of what are our goals. Do we want a space force, or do we want tourism in space? Do we want a lodge on the moon, or do we want the death ray? We need real clear boundaries as to where private industry can go.
Excellent.
Yeah, I like how you pointed out about the boundaries of private and weapons.
Yeah.
I grew up with Star Wars. It's just,
Amen, sister. You speak to the people. And then, so the next on our list is libraries.
Oh, my favorite thing in the whole world. Okay. I'm such a, I love libraries. I absolutely, it's my favorite. I do my roundtables at libraries. I try to get as many people to come into our libraries. They are not just about books. They are a cultural center for so many communities. And they have not become relics of the past because of technology. They have become more important than ever because of technology. So many of our communities, people have to go to the library to update their iPhone because they're on a satellite and it uses all of their data for the month if they update their iPhone. So they go to the library to do it. People have to go to fill out job applications. People need to go. We have knitting circles and sewing circles and kids things, and it all happens at the library. And I am for supporting libraries because if you go in, as soon as you cross the border into Canada, every community has a community center. They have a hockey rink, probably curling, and a community center. Every one of them has it. We don't have that here. We don't have those things, and libraries are as close as we have, and they're becoming more and more that community center than they've ever been, or than they've been in a long time.
Excellent. And then community housing, in as such as those who need assistance with their housing, or people who might age out of the house that they owned, age out in the sense that maybe their family has shrunk or they're physically incapable of either living within it due to stairs or maintenance. So would you support a publicly funded community housing for those in need?
Yeah, again, this goes back to life with dignity. We need to make sure that people can live their entire lives with dignity. And again, back to our daughter, we created a little community house in Shuila. We helped her get a house, and she has roommates and she can live independently, but she has roommates, so she's never by herself. Absolutely, we need to make sure that every community has what they need for every community member to be successful, because that's the way we build a successful state. Excellent.
And then publicly or privately funded elections.
You could get every dime out of elections, and they give you X amount of money and say, go fight, win. I would be the happiest person in the world. I am best / worst candidate, depending on who you ask, about fundraising. I don't do it. It drives people crazy. I took Bernie to heart, and I listened to what he said, and I send out a letter, and I tell people what I need, and I tell people what I'm doing, and I do things like this, and I talk to people, and I form good allies, and I go to the mailbox and money comes in.
Just being a regular person?
Just being a regular person.
Who knew?
I know. I know. And everyone says, don't tell anybody that. You can't do it that way. Well,
I appreciate
it is what I do.
I love it.
But even that, I feel like it still takes too much of my time.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to feel like I need to do something or answer a phone call or not answer a phone call or whatever because someone wrote me a check. That is not democracy. And you know, most of my checks are $25, so I don't really feel like I owe you much. but I do feel like the hundreds of people in my district that have all done the $25, I feel very, very indebted to every one of them. And my opponent raises $125,000 a year, and 5% of it comes from humans. 5.8, I'll give her 6%, comes from humans. One is shorter. The rest of it comes from corporations. So it doesn't surprise me she doesn't answer people's phone calls. It doesn't surprise me that she doesn't feel connected to her district, because those aren't the people who have been paying her for the last 10 years. I feel responsible to these people, and that's the way I think it should be.
Got Another beautiful answer.
Excellent. Yeah. You're moving me.
Oh.
Right at Eastern Washington. Gonna move in with my dad.
Come on over. It's a great place.
All right. I know for me it's a great place to visit. I love it, and I have considered, but right now I'm stuck in Tacoma for co-parenting. Also, I love Tacoma. I have to say, we have public utilities.
There you go.
Yep.
Oh, fine. Just throw that in. Running water. And you think
Neener. But we pay for our ferries, so give and take. We're almost done with this. We got a couple more, but legal services. A lot of people go to court for various reasons. Some of them are not punishment reasons, but I think I need to double check. I want to say 60% of people can't afford legal assistance.
Legal assistance is ridiculously expensive for most people, and also unavailable. And I know they put limits on our county defenders, our public defenders, and now they're just saying, well, you just don't get an attorney because we can't add more cases to our public defenders, so we don't have a public defender available for you. Like, I don't think that's the way that was supposed to work. I think that meant we needed more public defenders, not that people just didn't get any choice.
Right.
So I don't know, honestly, what the answer is, but it's definitely an area where we need to start to look at how we increase the availability and how we decrease. This is part of what's happened after 40 years of always sending attorneys and accountants to be legislators, is everything is written in a legalese and accounting. We are a government for the people and by the people, and ordinary citizens should be able to actually manage basic legal things without the need for an attorney. It doesn't have to be this difficult. And simplifying and streamlining the system so that people get effective representation, that they get quality services, that they're protected legally without having to have, a Harvard degree. It's not, we've made things harder than they have to be.
Excellent. I don't want to name names because I think the name that I want to say might be wrong, but we do have some people that I've heard speaking about making it so that the laws are written in a 8th grade reading level-ish. So loosely. So I'll try to network those people and connect.
Yeah, thank you.
And then first responders, should we privatize the police and fire departments?
Oh, heavens no. Heavens no. No, I don't want to have to get my checkbook out when my house catches on fire. That's probably a bad thing. And, again, it costs more in rural communities to provide basic services. It just does. We are not good bang for your buck. You do not get the economies of scale, but we have value. And it is so important to maintain rural communities and to ensure that they can survive and thrive without becoming suburban and urban. Our goal is not Seattle everywhere. We need rural communities, and frequently the best and only jobs in these rural communities are school teachers, state funded, police, which are locally funded, firefighters, which amazingly in my district are all volunteers. We don't actually have paid firefighters. Think about that. We have the largest national forest in the country, in the lower 48. And
it's all volunteer?
And it's all volunteer.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, we don't actually pay the firefighters. So that's kind of an interesting. And so those are not only important services, those are good jobs. And ensuring that we keep those public jobs that are public funded, that are funded from tax revenue throughout the state, allows rural communities to continue to thrive. Stop it.
We're very forgiving.
Oh, I'm not. I don't know how to make it go away.
We'll just pretend that's the, when you're a candidate and a parent, we're all parents. We know things interrupt.
Yes.
half the
Yes.
time we have a child running around behind us.
Mhm.
So you in one of the answers about, or I think in a couple answers earlier, you you mentioned a few times living with dignity, and so our last thing we like to discuss is an idea that's originated from us, and so it has no it's not like it's an idea that's been written up and ready to go into legislation, so that it is just a broad idea, but it's called a caregiver's basic income, so that if you're caring for a child, say under the age of 8, or an aging parent or somebody with a disability, you don't have to juggle all your familial responsibilities, caregiving responsibilities, and a job or two, that you receive a caregiver's basic income, and that income gives you Social Security credit, so that you're not like, I've been a stay-at-home parent for about 10 years, and I have a huge Social Security gap. So
Yes. Well, welcome to being a woman.
Yes.
Yeah, we get half our husbands when they die, but I'm like, well, what about all those years that I took care of everything so that he could go work?
Right.
I only get half of that, right? Yeah. I know in Europe a couple of years ago, a couple of countries, I want to say Switzerland, maybe Austria, actually put it on the ballot. Switzerland, Norway. Let's go Norway. Anyway, they put it on the ballot for a minimum income for everyone.
A basic.
Basic minimum income. And there was lots of discussion. It came pretty close. It didn't pass, but it started this conversation of, how are we ensuring that all of our citizens are cared for, and are we paying more out of the left hand because we're not paying anything out of the right hand? What are we really doing? And would we be fiscally more responsible to just let people take care of these things themselves? I am very open to the thought and the idea. It will take some legislation and some, how do you make it work? But I think it is a solution that we need to start looking towards, that we are spending more on programs that aren't working, and not enough on the things that are. And so how do we balance that? And, it's never perfect, and you got to try and see what works and see what doesn't. But yeah, closing that gap between men and women, closing that gap between staying at home and going to work, closing those things, we have to do it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Well, I don't think I've heard anybody not like that idea, I gotta say.
Well, if you'd like to interview my opponent, I'm sure you would.
Oh, sorry. People that we that we want to endorse.
We're not interviewing a lot of people who disagree with us.
But I do want to actually bring this to the other side, because I think if you can sell it right, how
absolutely.
So
there's a lot of stay-at-home moms who vote Republican.
Right.
Yeah.
And dads.
Yeah, and I was going to say, caregivers, I didn't call it the mom's basic income,
right,
for a reason. It's because I know a lot of men who are caretaking their parent, their dying uncle. It does, we're all caregivers.
Right. Yeah. And, and I go back to my daughter, her roommates all help with that. They really should be compensated.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of are, because we make it really attractive to be her roommate.
Good.
We can do that. But that should be something that what they do is valuable, and what they do is important. And if they weren't doing it, somebody would have to be paid to do it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I am done with the list, and to let other people have a chance, I will set my follow-up questions aside and open the door for the rest of the team.
Cool. I'm going to jump in
real quick. We have a new person on the bottom.
Oh, Oz? Yes, he has joined us. Hi, Oz. Thank you for coming in. So Erin Jorgen, she's actually from Spokane, so she's out in your neck of the woods. I heard that you were a big supporter of I-1600, universal health care. she's wondering is how the next universal healthcare proposal, about your thoughts on how the next universal healthcare proposal language or approach, initiative or sponsored bill could be stronger. Do you have any ideas of how that, how 1600 or, how can things be stronger for the next rounds to come?
Yeah, and I think the healthcare for all legislation that got a hearing last year, I think that's probably going to be the more effective way to do it. It's just been my experience that legislation goes through all these annoying steps that we all get tired of, and goes through all the lawyers, and comes out ready to go. Whereas initiatives are a great idea and we want this, but they don't always come out ready to go, and
Right.
it becomes trouble to get them actually implemented. I loved I-1600. I love the idea of it. I support it, but I wasn't surprised that people had a hard time getting that. How are we going to pay for it? So when it comes to the legislator, it's already, this is how we're paying for it. You guys don't need to worry your pretty little heads about it. We've already figured it out.
Well, it didn't have the funding pieces in there prior. I didn't.
The I-1600?
No, I'm sorry, the one in the legislature.
Right.
So some states have gone it through legislature, but there's no funding piece,
But
so
there's
it
no
just
funding,
sits
right.
there.
Right.
So how do you see how maybe a funding could possibly work to get something passed? I know that some of the issue was the 1% income tax.
Right.
Most people are okay with capital gains and maybe even doing a skewed thing there. So I just want to get your idea of how you think most people would be apt to support it funding wise.
Funding wise, yeah. And what I've been kind of banging away at people is we're already paying for it.
Right. Yeah, we are.
We're already paying for it, and we're not getting what we're paying for. So we're already paying for it. So I think part of it is just letting people know where we're already paying for it. When I tell people that if you have private insurance and you get put in jail, you can't use your private insurance. So we have to pay 100% of your medical care because they won't let you use your private insurance when they're like, what?
I didn't know they wouldn't let you use that. Okay.
Yeah, no. And if you have Apple Care, then you don't get to use your Apple Care. You get kicked off of, So there's a lot of legislative loopholes we can close like that ahead of time.
Okay.
And start showing the cost saving. And what I'm really trying to do is to get a task force, get the governor, get the health secretary together, and try this in the 7th. Let's use the 7th legislative district as our little experiment. We have the worst healthcare outcomes. We have the highest suicide rate. We have the lowest accessibility to healthcare. We have the highest unemployment. We only have 18% of the people actually using private insurance.
Wow.
The majority of people are either on Medicare, Medicaid, Apple Care, or uninsured. And because our uninsured rate is going up now that the mandate for the ACA, our hospitals are starting to have a higher rate of unreimbursed care, which is putting our hospitals at risk of closing, which is risking the economy of the entire district. So if that's not an emergency, I'm not exactly sure what, when we catch on fire, it's an emergency. When we flood, it's an emergency. I got people dying over here.
Right.
Literally, absolutely, literally, not hyperbolically. I've got people dying here. Let's try it here. Let's show people that it works. Let's see exactly where we save money and where we spend money. And then we can roll it out to the whole state. But I think we have enough good reasons to do it here. And we know enough, and we have enough. We've done enough studies between the I-1600 and the healthcare for all. We have a really good idea of how to do it. Mm-hmm. Let's just do it here.
Cool. That's interesting. So how do we improve the tax system in Washington? Come on, tell me how we're going to fix it.
Flip it over. Good God. 650 tax loopholes for corporations and businesses that don't have any sunset on them, don't have any sort of revisiting required. They said they were going to provide 100 jobs, and if they did or they didn't, they still get the tax loophole. First off, we need a serious audit of those 650 tax incentives and loopholes, and tell me each one of them and what we're getting for it. Because bang for your buck out of tax incentives is never what they sell it as.
No.
So that first and foremost, that's low hanging fruit in my world. That's just cleaning house. Let's take care of that. Then let's find a way to tax some of this income that it's not a mystery that, 5 of the richest people in the world live in our state.
It's not.
It's not because the weather's so nice in Seattle. I'm sorry.
It is, isn't it though?
It's just not.
It's 3 months of hell followed by 9 months of rain.
That's right. So let's take a look at all of this income that is not being taxed.
So you are okay with looking at an income tax?
Not earned income tax.
Okay.
So not income tax on what you do for work, but
Okay.
there's a lot of other money changing hands. There's a lot of other ways that people are generating income that's not working.
Got it.
They're not getting salary, they're not getting paid. No, not that kind of income tax. But let's look at all the other ways, and there are a lot of them. And how can we start taxing that money that people are generating off capital, not off labor? So it's money that's generated off capital, not money that's generated off labor.
So a lot of the capital gains.
A lot of the capital gains, a lot of the stock trading, a lot of the estates stuff that they don't want to show as estate stuff, because if
Got it.
let's sit down with the financial planners and find out where they tell people to hide money and then close those.
Okay, I like that idea.
And let's go back to old school tax incentives that absolutely, if you want to, you want to put money back into your business, you want to retool your business, you want to train your employees, you want to put money back into infrastructure, here you go. But if you want to put money in the bank, pay up. Yeah, economies only work when money is in circulation. So we have to get this money circulating, and we have to make it an incentive to get it out of their bank and into our economy.
Excellent. Thank you.
So those are the first two, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? I got a couple in. So Brian, do you have some? Or Oz?
Real quick, as a fellow resident of Eastern Washington, of course, water is one of the most important resources that we have over here. What are some of the issues in this area that you are championing, and what are some of the things that we could do to help those issues?
So in my world, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. I spent enough time in the desert to know that managing our water is going to be probably the leading indicator for how well we do as a society in the future. We are surrounded by water, and so people forget, because everywhere you look, there's a lake, there's a river, and they're big. But our groundwater is a real issue, and development. I love the fact that Washington State public water is the #1 water right. It's not consumable water, it's not agricultural water, it's public. The public has a right to always have these rivers flowing, to always have these lakes available, to always have the fish that are in them, and maintaining them. And most of what I do around water is just educating people as to why that's more important to them than unbridled development where we're using water. That if we maintain the free flowing water that we have, then we can maintain the quality of life we've enjoyed in Washington for 100 years. The Hearst decision was a huge talking point last year, and I know they say they fixed it. They didn't fix it. And we've got a lot of work to do, but that is not something I'm going to kick very hard this year, but something that I will continue to work on. You want fun, light reading, the Milagro Beanfield Wars. is a great study in sociology and water. And I used to live in New Mexico where that all happened, so I get it. And one of the main reasons I'm opposed to the silica smelter in Newport is because they want to put it on the recharge for 5 different watersheds.
Being efficient, you're being efficient again. That was a follow-up question.
I'm so sorry.
It's funny because I was actually looking at the Newport smelter on your website, and I was going to compliment you on your website because I actually love it. I'm navigating through it, and it's very extensive, a lot of information, and all the things that you stand for are excellent. So I really don't have any further questions. I just love that you're a steward of the environment.
Yeah, I am a steward of the environment. It's important to me. We only get one planet.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And I feel like the smelter is improperly placed because, as you said, it's on an aquifer recharge site. But the silica, it's a silica smelter, right? And it's primarily being used for the production of solar panels.
No, that's the worst part.
Oh,
the worst part.
Because I had read something and but we need it because it makes green energy.
Yes.
And so it leads me to there are shades of green, and we always need to be making our green energy greener.
Yes.
So would you be okay with the smelter if it were moved to an appropriate physical location?
An appropriate physical location, we could have a much different conversation about it. Honestly, at this point, there is a glut of silica, smelted metal, silica metal smelted already on the market because of the tariffs with China. China is the only place that actually makes the components for the solar panels, and then they get shipped back here and made into solar panels. So at this moment, we don't need to do it. Pennsylvania just started an aluminum smelting plant that doesn't release anything into the atmosphere. No greenhouse gases. If you can do it with aluminum, I'm guessing it's a very similar process. We can do it with silica. So why are we going to build a plant now that's going to be out of date in 5 years? And we don't need the product. That was the selling point, was that it was going to be carbon neutral because eventually it would go into solar panels, which, okay, great. We have to have these components to have green energy, fine. But the location is absolutely wrong. And now with the glut of silica metal in the market and the tariffs with China, there's no sane reason to continue down this path. Particularly that now that we know that there's another type of smelting coming down the pipe that will be able to do it without creating 320,000 tons of greenhouse gases a year.
Excellent. Wow. Thank you. I feel a camaraderie with you because we're fighting a liquid natural gas facility at the
Yes, port. You are. Yes.
So for 7 reasons, it is inappropriately located. Just the geography and proximity to people, horrifying. But then it's also investing in an infrastructure that's dying.
Right.
So what are we doing?
Well, yeah. I don't know.
And I would also like to point out real quick, there was a gas plant explosion in Arizona today.
Oh boy!
Explosion. And every time I see that, I think of the LNG in Tacoma, and it's an absolute disgrace that it's there.
And well, I would think Tacoma again. Maybe I'm dating myself, but I remember when the Asarco plant was in Tacoma.
Me too.
Have we not learned?
Yeah.
Have we not?
My grandfather actually retired from the old Kaiser aluminum plant. Unfortunately, now he's got health problems as a result, but we need to work. I'm not going to go into that.
Yeah. It's an endless cycle of scratching each other's backs.
But that's why we have to make good decisions based on good facts. And if we need this material and we need it, then fine, let's put it in the very best place we can put it. And Newport is not on any. There's not any measurable that says that is a good place to put that.
Excellent. Well, thank you for talking about that. I have.
Sorry.
No, but they're not related to this, so I'm open to wiggles.
I'm gonna go back a little bit because I thought we were done with the tax, but somebody did actually ask another question in the live feed regarding it. So I'm gonna go back to a tax question again. I apologize, but so about a corporate profit profit tax. Is that something you would support, a corporate profit tax?
So I think the B&O tax is just a sales tax. And I'm not a fan of the B&O tax because I don't think you can tax people on the business and not tax them on the, and if, whether they make a profit or not. It's like, well, how are they going to pay their taxes if they can't pay themselves, you know? So a profit tax versus a B&O tax, yes, but I think it needs to be refined probably a little bit more than that even, because there's ways to monkey with profit and loss. And so we need to come up with the right way to measure actual money going through the business. What of that is actual profit, and what portion of that, you know, did you benefit? And basically all taxes are is, how did you benefit from the state providing this infrastructure? What is your toll for doing business in the state of Washington? Because we've provided you with all these things. That's, you know, that's the portion that you need to pay. And that needs to be fair. And currently our B&O structure is not. And it's really difficult for small businesses.
Thank you. All right, go ahead, Courtney or Brian or Oz.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the aging out of foster care.
Oh yeah.
My brother was adopted, and so if not for that, he might have aged out of foster care. And so that's my little personal, like, why I think
Right.
what triggers my compassion on the subject. But you know, people turn 18, sometimes they're not out of high school yet.
Right. So this young kid that we've taken on, we just call our son now. He was in foster care. He was in mental health care, as a result of trauma as a child. And then at 18, you know, gets the boot and you're not our problem anymore. I don't know who in their right mind thought that was going to lead to a successful life. And to his credit, he's an amazing young man, and he went to college and he put himself through college. But it has taken a village of people holding him up and supporting him and helping him move forward. I'm glad that we were able to do that. I am so grateful for him every day in our life. He has taught me so much compassion and just gratitude. But he should have never been put in that situation. That should have never happened. It should have never happened that he was traumatized as a child, and then it should have never happened that the state who took responsibility for him continued that trauma by not providing a stable, nurturing, healthy environment for him. The only way that these kids have a fighting chance is if they are taken out of that traumatic environment, is that they have that stability and that nurturing and that healthy environment. And that becomes their life experience, not the trauma. And so it doesn't end at 18. It doesn't end at 20. It doesn't end until it ends. And that's going to vary from person to person and depending on what their life story is. But it was no fault of his own. And that's the part we all need to remember, is this is not a shortcoming on someone because they happen to be born to parents who didn't know how to parent.
Do you have any policy suggestions for the now situation? Because I know we're all seeking these improvements of universal single payer healthcare, community housing, you know, these things that would help the social safety net,
Right.
would help aging out. But in the now, have you had some time to think about some policy suggestions that might help?
Well, I think one of the policy suggestions is just allowing for some room. That the first thing we can do is just not have hard end dates. That we can just take those hard dates out. And it's kind of like the breakfast after the bell. It was ridiculous. We weren't feeding kids. We had their money. We had their lunch. We had already paid for it, but we couldn't feed them because once the bell rings, then we have this hard start for school and they have to be attending school. They can't be eating. No, feed the kid. Mm-hmm. You know, with the foster care, it's the same thing. We have this hard date that says, okay, once they cross this line, we can't do anything. Let's take some of those hard stops out and let's go, okay, this is the guideline. Here are the reasons to extend that guideline. Here are reasonable extensions for that guideline. And here's kind of a framework we can start to work with. And I think that for the now, that's the simplest and most effective thing we can do, is just take those hard stops off. And, are they in a nurturing environment? Are they succeeding? Would it be to the benefit of society for them to continue to be in that environment? Then let's let that continue.
Can I jump in on this subject a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Please.
Courtney says no.
No.
So with foster care, so I come from a different situation. I ended up getting custody of my niece and nephew before we got, as the state was thinking about getting involved. We were trying to, so I ended up getting custody of my niece and nephew, but there really is no support out there for relative caregivers at all, money-wise either. I mean, I'm a single mom of one, but then now I have two more. Is there anything out there that you can see, or is that something that you would, could I get it in your guys' brains to maybe look at when you're looking at some of this reform? Because it's been a couple times where I really just didn't have any cash, and all I could go in my head, like, how do I do this? Do I have to put him in foster care now? Do I have to get rid of? I mean, it crushes our hearts, right? If I can't take care of my own it's either you keep them and you all struggle, or you give them away, and give them away is just not an option. Right. But we ended up being homeless because I couldn't keep up with everything. How can we fit some of that into the system? I'd like this basic caregiver's income that we've talked about, because I think that would help with that. But as it stands right now in the foster care system, we get no help whatsoever.
No, and I understand that, and we have 2 children that are biologically ours. We have 7 children that call us mom and dad. So I get it. And when they say they need something, there's not a hierarchy there. It doesn't matter. There are children, and they're all
exactly
adults.
Right.
They're all adults now. But it's still, right before I was talking to you, I was talking to one of them, and had a job interview today, and he was all excited, and he called, and and they're our kids.
They are ours.
Yeah. But we knew we could only be responsible for 2. We only had 2 for that reason. That was, a reasonable decision to make in our lives.
I had 1. I had 1, thinking that was it.
We can do 2. Life said, no, you can do 7. You'll be fine.
I'm with you there too. We have 7. We have 7 together, and it's quite the experience.
It is
no help outside of the home. So.
Yeah, I had 1 and then raised 4 altogether. So yeah.
They actually got my husband a t-shirt last year for Father's Day. It said, who are all these kids and why do they keep calling me dad?
Okay, that's awesome.
But yeah, how do we make sure, because these kids we've taken on, they needed more, and how do we make sure the people that are willing to do this, and again, that safe, nurturing, stable environment that we've been able to provide for them. Now they're all turning around, and they are all quality contributing members of society. Mm-hmm. That's saved the state of Washington a ton of money.
Right. I know I have. Yeah. Just jumping in for the couple that I've taken in.
I'm telling you, I'm a lot of bang for your buck. These kids are in a place where they can do good things because of good people. I don't expect to be reimbursed for that dollar for dollar.
No.
But there are times when, I need a hand. I need some help. And
these dang bills don't stop.
These dang bills don't stop. They don't, they he had to have new clothes for his job interview, had to have a new pair of shoes, those don't just fall out of trees. So recognizing that, and again, looking for these places where legislatively we can create some room so that if you're meeting this criteria, are they living in your house? Are they eating out of your fridge? Are you the one buying their clothes? Well, then here's a minimum, a couple $100 a month or whatever to help defer the cost of that. And all you have to do is just make sure they get to their appointments on time and that they're safe.
Yeah.
You know, and not going to change your quality of life, but definitely help you out.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to get in some brains out there that when policies being made, keep those people in mind.
And honestly, everyone should have that experience.
Yeah.
I don't want everyone to be homeless. I don't want everyone to have to go to the fridge and have kids standing there and there's nothing in it. But having had that experience gives you a tremendous amount of compassion and empathy that I don't know how else you get.
That is true.
You know?
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Courtney.
Thank you.
No sorries allowed.
No sorries allowed.
So I'd say the third one that I made note of, you were talking about the value of rural community. And I'd say, you know, off the cuff, that means agricultural community. I mean, not exclusively, but often. And so I'm going towards ag here. So I'm tying it into a previous answer.
Segue to ag.
I mean, my dad has 10 acres and he's impacted by ag rules because of you have a plant on your property we want to spray, or don't use the water that sources off of your property and flows away from you. It's not yours. That kind of, and then I also like to think about the destruction of modern agriculture, and it's be it plant or animal based, there's harm coming from food production. And so are there, I mean, maybe if this is not a passion part, then let's talk later about ideas I already have. But do you have any ag food production related things that you're like, you know what, I'd like to change this?
So 1 in 7 farmers is under 50 acres in Washington State. 1 in 5 are women. I know. Go girl farmers. So although we think of ag in Washington as being giant wheat fields, the majority of our ag is actually small, is under 50 acres, and it's 90% family owned. So these are small family owned lifestyles. So when we start talking about regulations and how do we make sure that we're not harming the environment by producing food, and let's be really clear, the whole eating thing is really big for most people.
Love it.
I know. So it is, in my mind, it's always a little bit more lofty of a thing because, well, it feeds people. We're not making widgets here. We're not making, tchotchkes. We're feeding people. So they kind of get a little bit of a pass on some of the destruction because, well, we have to eat. But yeah, how do we balance that? And the things I would like to see is encouraging more small, dense, women-owned community farms. We have 127 farmers markets in 112 cities. Those are things that help build community. They not only feed people, they not only provide economics, but they build community. And that's what I always will come back to. And although rural is ag, rural is not necessarily ag. Rural is just low density. Rural is people who just like a little room. I have 20 acres and I grow horseshit. All in my place.
I'll come visit and we'll have a lovely discussion about permaculture.
Yes, I am so good for the soil. I spread it, and I have living organic soil that has, it's totally organic, nothing, no pesticides, no herbicides, just.
That's beautiful. I actually make my own soil too. That's
so yeah, it's great. I have beautiful soil, but that's okay. I just it's a carbon sink.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am storing carbon for all of you people, and I'm happy to do it.
I have a simple 1/4 acre, and I call it an urban farm because I've got 15 fruit trees on it. So
wow.
We're doing our part, macro and micro.
Yeah, it is. It's a good thing.
And really I wanted to hear that it's whatever the decision is that it's supportive of small family farms or
Yes.
communal farms, because my goal, I mean, the World Health Organization says it's small farms that are going to feed the world. They're most effective at it. And really small farms, they're more likely to have hedgerows and not, wheat from fence post to fence post. Right. And so, like, I don't think of it as small farms doing the damage. And if someone isn't farming in an optimized fashion, a small farm is probably going to be a little more friendly to learning something right. different. Whereas mega corporations are like, we're doing just fine, thanks.
Right.
So while I feel like you were hedging against my question, you were actually just where I wanted you to be.
Well, I'm glad I'm right where you wanted to be. But I do, all of our neighbors garden. And so I get that. I show up at my house and there's a bag of produce on my door. That's the way we feed each other. That's the way we've been feeding each other for years in these little communities. And when people grow gardens, that's what it is, everybody shares. So building on that and building on that community that fosters, it seems like it's a win all the way around.
Absolutely.
And I give them all the horse poop they can garden with. So I supply the fertilizer, natural fertilizer, all you want.
That's wonderful. Thank you for doing your part. I joke that I'm a seed farmer because I forget to harvest things.
Oh yeah.
I'm just a seed farmer. I feed birds. So anybody else?
I think we're good. Okay, so what we would love for you to do is state your name, what office you're running for, a little blurb that you always like to get out so they can remember what you're about, where they can find you, and how people can help.
All right, so my name is Karen Hardy. I'm running for the state senate in the 7th legislative district, which is the northeast corner of Washington. You can find me at karenforsenate.com. You can tweet me at Karen Senate. You can Facebook me at Karen4 Senate. You can call me. You can, however you want to get a hold of me. I am always available and I love to talk to people. I'm running because I believe democracy requires participation. And I believe in being the change I want to see. And no one loves their community more than I do. And no one understands it more than I do. And I want to go and make sure that we have what we need to be successful. You can always help me by sharing. I have 11,000 miles to cover, so I need all the help. Cards and letters with checks in them are always appreciated. And make a list. Write 10 names down on it. Call them today. Tell them their ballots are going to be in on Saturday. Call them next week and ask them if they got their ballots. And call them one more time before August 7th and make sure they turned in their ballot. Voter turnout is the key for everything. Get people involved, whether it's for me or for someone else.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you. Just so everybody knows out there as well, is that you don't even have to produce your own stamp this year.
No.
You get it, you fill it out, and you just throw it in.
You guys missed it. You probably saw on the spokesman review front page today was Ferry County did not do prepaid postage. But you know what? They are now. I blew up their phones.
Good job.
I put out a press release and they are going to have prepaid ballots.
Oh, Karen.
Awesome.
You are amazing.
You're already fighting for us.
You are. So thank you again so very much for taking the time out. This was just a beautiful interview. So thank you. And thank you everybody for tuning in and caring. And we shall see you next time.